The life story of Vincent van Gogh and how he became a famous artist has been described to be one of the most moving and extraordinary chapters in the history of art. In just 10 years, Vincent created more than 850 paintings, including some of the most iconic artworks in human history. Yet, ironically, it is said that he only saw one painting when he was alive and had to live his life in poverty. His story is so full of tragic controversy that it even popularized the concept of a tortured artist, a character who's in constant pain and frustration with art, often associated with mental illness. But his life story was so much more than that. So let us look into the full history of Vincent van Gogh, from a failed artist to one of history's greatest painters, including all of the amazing stories and mysteries that continue to add fascination to his legacy. This is more than an artist's journey. It's one of the most inspiring stories of human struggles, moving relationships, and the profound impact of those who love him. Vincent van Gogh was born on the 30th of March, 1853, in Nuenen, a village in the south of Netherlands. He was the eldest surviving son of Theo van Gogh and Anna carpenters, and he had 2 brothers and 3 sisters. It is reported that Vincent hated having his photograph taken, and this is the only confirmed photo that we have of Vincent that we can be sure with 100% certainty, taken when he was 19 years old. In a letter, Vincent was described his childhood to be cold, austere, and sterile. Growing up with a father who was a very strict Protestant preacher, it's fair to say that Vincent didn't really get along with his parents. Of all the family members that he has, Vincent was the closest to his younger brother Theo, who looked a lot like Vincent. In fact, some of the pictures that were first thought to be Vincent are later discovered to be Theo, including a photograph from 1873 and a painting from 1887 that had to be corrected. When Vincent and Theo was still a child, they would spend time together playing in wheatfields, heath, and pine forests. Growing up in the countryside allowed Vincent to have a strong connection to nature, a connection that would become important in the later years of his life. Now, even though Vincent was always interested in art, he did not always plan to become an artist. His first job was to work as an apprentice in an international art dealership, the famous Gauguin company located in The Hague. Vincent got the job thanks to the connection of his uncle's son, who also worked in the same place. Later, Theo would also follow his brother and uncle into the business of art dealership, working in the Brussels branch of Gauguin. During that time as an apprentice, Vincent became a frequent visitor to London's great museums and galleries, slowly training his eye for good art. In a visitor's book kept at the British Museum, we can see that on the 20th of August, 1874, Vincent was recorded as the 4th visitor of that day, came to see a drawing that was credited to Rembrandt. Around the same time, he would also write to Theo about his passion for art, mentioning the black and white prints in publications such as The Graphic and Illustrated London News. Over time, he would collect hundreds of these prints, eventually building a collection of nearly 1,000. It was during this time working at Gauguin that Vincent and Theo started writing to each other regularly, constantly exchanging their thoughts about art and life. Both of them had very similar beginnings, but the path would quickly move in different directions. Theo was one of the company's best workers, quickly advancing in his career, while Vincent, however, could not stay in the business for long. Even though Vincent was interested in art, he hated the entire art market that only seemed to care about profit. So, in 1876, Vincent decided to quit and started searching for a different purpose. At first, he tried to be a teaching assistant at a boys' boarding school in Ramsgate. And later, he also tried to work in a bookshop in Dordrecht. But unfortunately, none of these jobs seemed to work out for Vincent. Without a proper direction in life, Vincent started to question himself. Very often, he would turn to religion for comfort, and he started to wonder whether he should follow his father's path to become a preacher. In a letter written to Theo, Vincent even included a long religious text expressing his wish to serve God. Looking to have a higher purpose, Vincent then tried to be a lay preacher in a mining region in Belgium, teaching and giving Bible readings. But unfortunately, Vincent was not seen to be the right person for the job. After the 6-month trial, his contract ended without renewal. Vincent, now without a purpose and was facing financial difficulties, became increasingly depressed. But during all this time, he still continued to write letters to Theo, who was doing really well at Goupil. And in these letters, Vincent would sometimes include drawings of the places he had seen. So when Theo knew that Vincent was facing financial difficulties, he decided to send some money to his brother and even encouraged Vincent to focus on his interest in art, believing they might help with his depression. When Vincent received the financial help, he was completely overwhelmed. He then replied to Theo and confessed that he had been questioning his own identity. In a letter, Vincent even compared himself to a bird trapped in a cage. He felt that he's not living up to his own potential and that he must be good for something. But what could it be? Interestingly, Vincent, in his long reflection, wrote that when he tried to understand the works of great artists, he felt like he could find God in them. This experience made him believe that perhaps he could also serve a higher purpose by being an artist, and decided to pursue this ambition. When Theo got the reply from his brother, he was so happy for Vincent that Theo even promised to support Vincent financially until Vincent could make a living by himself as an artist. And because of this promise, the two brothers would continue to write to each other regularly, with Theo sending some money to Vincent almost every month. Unknowingly, these letters between the two brothers would later become important historical artifacts, accidentally documenting Vincent's entire journey as an artist. Surprisingly, Vincent did not keep most of the letters that he got from Theo. Only about 32 of them survived. Yet, Theo treasured every single letter that he got from Vincent, holding on to more than 650 letters. Vincent's parents were extremely disappointed. They disagreed with their son's decision to become an artist, which in their eyes was a social failure. While Vincent was still practicing drawing, his brother Theo had been promoted to manager in the Paris branch of Goupil. With Vincent now without a job, Theo continued to support him financially. To become an artist, Vincent moved back to The Hague. But he knew that his skills in paintings were not good, so he took art lessons from a cousin by marriage, a well-known artist named Anton Mouv, who agreed to teach Vincent the basics in watercolor and oil painting. Vincent visited his studio almost every day, and during this time, one of Vincent's uncles, Cornelius Marinus van Gogh, decided to give him his first commission in art, ordering from Vincent 12 drawings of city views in The Hague. Vincent was very happy. It was his first paid job as an artist, and it gave him the opportunity to develop his skills. Despite the myth that Vincent only saw one painting, he did receive 20 guilders from his uncle for these drawings. But unfortunately, Vincent would later end up disappointed, because he felt that his uncle did not fully appreciate the drawings he had made. In 1883, Vincent realized it was too expensive to live in the city. After going through some tough times, he reluctantly decided to move back to his parents' house in Nuenen. This turned out to be a good decision. It was the perfect environment for Vincent to become a peasant painter. Nuenen was home to many farmers, laborers and weavers, which he sketched and painted at every opportunity. But despite his efforts, Vincent was still unable to sell any of these paintings. His self-esteem started to take a hit, and he slowly realized he was relying too much on Theo financially and feeling like he's a poor beggar waiting for charity. So in March of 1884, Vincent decided that the money he received from Theo would no longer be handouts, but payments for the paintings Vincent would send to Theo every month. He also declared that his works would be Theo's property, to do as he wished, which Theo reluctantly accepted. A year later, Vincent's father passed away in Nuenen, and for the next few weeks after the funeral, Vincent sent multiple letters to Theo, updating him about their family. What's interesting about these letters is that Vincent specifically mentioned how he's been trying to distract himself from sadness by observing the life of peasants at all hours of the day. He became so deeply involved in this that he rarely thinks of anything else. He then wrote in detail about a new painting that he was working on, a painting that he described to be a tremendous battle, but one that filled him with great enthusiasm. He named the painting The Potato Eaters and explained that these people eating potatoes by their lamp had dug the earth with the same hands they are now putting onto a dish. He wanted these paintings to capture the difficulties of a peasant's life, implying manual labor and a meal that was honestly earned. Vincent was really proud of this new painting and would even describe it to be the best painting that he had done, but unfortunately, it did not receive the positive reaction that he expected. Anton van Rappert, a Dutch painter and a friend of Vincent, received a lithographed copy of the work by Vincent. But Anton did not like the work at all. He criticized the drawing, saying that such work can't be meant seriously, and that the peasant woman in the back had a coquettish little hand. Vincent was very hurt and disappointed. This criticism almost ended their friendship. Vincent later acknowledged that there were many flaws in the Potato Eaters, but it's really his first painting that he loved with all his heart, and that he would never disown them. In Paris, Theo was trying to help Vincent sell his paintings. But the dark and depressing tone of these paintings are not very appealing to the French. So Theo wrote to Vincent and told him that in France, many modern paintings are much more bright and colorful. He also wrote about a new art movement in Paris called Impressionism, something that Vincent had never seen. Vincent realized how little he really knew about art. So he decided to move to Paris with Theo, hoping to learn more about Impressionism. This decision would turn out to be a huge turning point for Vincent. In Paris, Vincent was deeply impressed by the works of Claude Monet and other Impressionists. Staying in Theo's apartment in Rue Le Pic, Vincent started to learn from Impressionism and began to use much brighter colors in his works. Vincent and Theo were also big fans of Japanese prints. They would collect Japanese art, and Vincent would study them extensively by copying the visual elements, including the cover of a French magazine that became the inspiration for one of his works, the courtesan. To save money, Vincent would paint self-portraits on the back of other paintings. This allowed Vincent to practice drawing using a mirror without the need to hire models. As a result, there are many self-portraits from his time in Paris that exist today. During his time in France, Vincent also made many friends who were interested in art, including painters Émile Bernard and Paul Gauguin. Both of them would later play a big part in this story. While living in the city, Vincent also met a painter named John Russell, who painted a portrait of Vincent as a gift. Vincent really liked this painting, and according to many of his friends, this drawing was the most accurate and realistic portrait of Vincent. Vincent experienced a lot in Paris, but after some time, he started to get frustrated living in the city. He wanted to be in a warmer climate, a place closer to nature with peace and quiet. So after some discussion with Theo, Vincent decided to leave Paris and move to the south of France, to a small town in Arles near the Rhone River. The environment in the south was a great inspiration. Vincent was so delighted, they immediately started to work. He painted many surroundings and applied what he had learned from Paris. His style is now loose and expressive. He also noticed that Impressionist paintings tend to fade over time, so he made his paintings even more colorful. Vincent was happy to live in Arles, but he soon started to feel isolated and did not want to live alone. So he came up with a plan and asked Theo to set up a studio in the south for a group of artists to live together. Theo would pay for their living costs, and in exchange, these artists would give Theo a few pieces of their work, which Theo could then sell in Paris. Theo liked the idea, and to set up this artist community, Theo gave Vincent enough money to rent 4 rooms in the Yellow House on Lamartine. The street view of this house is now captured in Vincent's own paintings, including the bedroom where he stayed. Vincent was very excited and started inviting many artists from Paris. But trying to get them to move south was much more difficult than he expected. In the end, after many rounds of negotiation, only Paul Gauguin agreed to come. At first, Vincent and Gauguin seemed to work well together. They would look for inspirations in the same area, and even painted the same subject, including members of the Gauguin family and the night cafe. To decorate the Yellow House, Vincent painted sunflowers to hang on the empty walls, and this scene was captured in the painting by Gauguin. Gauguin really liked the sunflowers done by Vincent, even saying that's better than the similar work by Claude Monet. Gauguin wanted to have this painting in exchange for his own work, and so Vincent painted multiple copies of the same subject. But unfortunately, the good times did not last for long. According to a journal written by Gauguin, one evening, Vincent got drunk and threw a glass of absinthe over his head. The next morning, Vincent apologized, and Gauguin told Vincent that he forgave him, but he felt that they shouldn't stay together any longer and was planning to leave for Paris. Later that day, Gauguin went out for a walk, and Vincent seemed to have a mental breakdown. Vincent appeared suddenly and rushed towards Gauguin with a razor blade, but when Gauguin stared at him, Vincent stopped himself and quickly left the scene. But then, apparently, at 11:30 that night, Vincent showed up briefly at the brothel, gave a worker an envelope that contained a piece of his left ear, and went back home. When the police were reported, I went to the yellow house to look for Vincent. They found Vincent unconscious in his bed. What really happened that night was still a mystery. But it's important to note that throughout his life, Vincent struggled in relationships. He also faced many rejections in love, and all of these factors combined may have caused his mental breakdown. In a letter written to his sister, Vincent even confessed that he kept having the most impossible and highly unsuitable love affairs, which always ended with him in shame and disgrace. Now, as far as we now know, in his early years, Vincent had proposed to 3 women: Caroline Hunneby, Eugenie Lawyer, and his cousin, Carol Stryker. But for different reasons, all 3 rejected Vincent, while the rejection from Carol Stryker really affected him. In a letter from 1881, Vincent told Theo that he loved Carol so much that he felt like she's the closest person to him, and he's the closest person to her. But when he repeated these words to Carol, she simply replied, "No, nay, never." Vincent was devastated and got into severe depression. After that, he started having many relationships that are highly unsuitable. In 1882, Vincent got involved with Saint-Rémy, a pregnant former prostitute with a young daughter. Vincent saw them homeless, living on the streets, and out of pity, he moved them into his studio in The Hague. Vincent's family, including Theo, could not accept their relationship. And when things started to go wrong, Vincent had to leave them behind and moved away. Then, in 1884, when he was back in Nuenen, Vincent had a relationship with Margot Begeman, an older woman who lived nearby. Vincent thought about marrying her, but her sister and Vincent's parents strongly disagreed. In a letter, Vincent even shared a secret to Theo. It turns out that one day, when Margot overheard some negative rumors about their relationship, she had a mental breakdown and apparently took poison. Vincent rushed her to the doctor and she survived. But the incident ended their relationship. When Vincent moved to Paris, he also met Agostina Segatori, an owner of a restaurant. The details of this relationship is unknown, but according to Paul Gauguin, Vincent was very much in love. But again, it ended with Vincent heartbroken. However, even after facing all these rejections, Vincent still believed in love, with many of his drawings still having lovers walking side by side. Vincent's missing ear is still one of the most mysterious events in the history of art. It is widely believed that Vincent injured himself, but there is no definitive answer. What's interesting is that some historians actually disagree and suggest that his missing ear was caused by Paul Gauguin. This is because Gauguin was famous for his skill in fencing, and it's recorded that he brought his fencing equipment with him when he was staying at the Yellow House with Vincent. So it's possible that Gauguin, who was planning to leave, was stopped by Vincent. And as they got into a fight, Gauguin might have used his sword to defend himself and accidentally injured Vincent's left ear. Interestingly, both men would later claim that Vincent did it to himself. But this could easily be a lie to cover up the shame and to avoid legal trouble. Mysteriously, Vincent would also later claim that he had no memories of what truly happened. But he did write to Theo in a letter, saying it's fortunate that Gauguin and him are not armed with machine guns and other dangerous weapons. But regardless of what truly happened, Vincent was sent to a hospital. In a medical record, Dr. Felix Ray, who treated him, made a drawing of his injuries. When Vincent finally healed, he was allowed to leave, but his depression just started to get worse. Paul Gauguin had disappeared to Paris, the police had sealed up the Yellow House, and the shocking event had appeared in the local news. When Vincent returned to town, some local residents started to see Vincent as a threat. They even sent a public petition to the mayor, asking Vincent to be locked up in an isolation cell. Vincent's family, including Theo, were deeply worried, while Vincent's dream for the Yellow House came to an end. Vincent knew that it was getting harder for him to maintain his freedom, so he agreed to seek treatment in a mental asylum. He chose to go to St. Paul, a small facility on the outskirts of Saint-Rémy. But little does he know that this mental hospital will lead to one of the most important periods of his life as an artist. In St. Paul Hospital, Vincent was allowed to have an extra room to be used as a studio. And very quickly, he started painting again, with many different parts of the asylum becoming the subject of his works. At first, Vincent spent most of his time in the garden of the facility. So he painted many flowers in the surroundings, including the poppies, irises, and trees with ivies. Then, after a few months, Vincent was allowed to walk outside of the asylum, so he painted many subjects around the area, including the wheatfields and olive groves. Vincent's recovery looks promising, but he was still unhappy and was anxiously waiting for letters from Theo. Theo, at this time, had just gotten married to Joanna Bonger, an English teacher from the Netherlands. They were deeply in love and were enjoying their honeymoon. When Theo finally sent his letters, he complimented many of the new paintings that he received from Vincent, saying that he had captured the essence of nature and life beautifully. But interestingly, Theo also mentioned a particular painting, which he referred to as The Village in the Moonlight, saying that he doesn't really like it, and felt that the search for style had taken away the real sentiment of things. Vincent felt the same. In a letter to his friend Émile Bernard, Vincent also wrote that the painting was a setback and a failure, adding that once again, he allowed himself to paint the stars too big. It was a painting done quickly in the asylum during the day, inspired by a view through his bedroom window. On the 31st of January 1890, Joanna gave birth to a baby boy, and Theo decided to name him Vincent van Gogh, after his brother. When Theo told Vincent about the good news, he also shared that in France, an art critic named Albert Aurier had written a very positive article about Vincent, praising the details of his work as having a profound and childlike sincerity with a great love for nature and personal truth. Despite the rumors that Vincent wasn't appreciated in his time, there were actually many positive comments about his work. In exhibitions, many artists would compliment Vincent's paintings and agree that his work really stood out. Then, during this time, in a show in Brussels, a Belgian artist and art collector bought a painting of Vincent, The Red Vineyard, for 400 Belgian francs. This became the first and only painting of Vincent that was officially sold and recorded in exhibition while Vincent was still alive. Vincent was happy for the recognition, but he wasn't used to positive news and felt a lot of pressure. After he read the article about his work, he actually wrote back to the art critic Albert Aurier, suggesting that he should have praised another artist named Monticelli instead. As months went by, Vincent got increasingly frustrated in the asylum, especially being surrounded by many other patients who were mentally worse. By September, he told Theo that he wanted to leave and wished to stay in the countryside. Theo then tried to look for a place for Vincent with the help of a friend. Theo was introduced to Dr. Paul Gachet, who lived in Auvers-sur-Oise, a village close to Paris. Dr. Gachet agreed to keep an eye on Vincent if he stayed at a nearby inn. It sounded like a good idea, so everyone quickly agreed. So, on the 16th of May, 1890, Vincent finally left the asylum. On the way to Auvers-sur-Oise, he stopped by in Paris to see Theo's family. This was the first time Vincent met Joanna. Joanna later wrote that she thought Vincent would look sick, but to her surprise, he seemed healthy, smiling, and determined. Vincent liked Joanna too, finding her charming and kind. Reportedly, when Vincent met his nephew for the first time, both brothers had tears in their eyes. But sadly, this happiness did not last. Vincent soon left for Auvers-sur-Oise, and he would never return to Paris. Vincent van Gogh arrived to the village on the 20th of May, 1890. He stayed at Auvers-sur-Oise, an inn and a restaurant that is now a historical site. After spending a year in a mental asylum, it was liberating for Vincent to freely explore the countryside. His time in Auvers-sur-Oise would be the most productive in his entire career. He would wander around seeking subjects, with many of the sceneries now captured in his paintings. Dr. Paul Gachet, who kept an eye on Vincent, was also very interested in art. Within a few days, Vincent and Dr. Gachet became friends and got along really well. Vincent would visit him regularly and did many paintings in his house, including the garden, the doctor's daughter, Margaret, and 2 portraits of Dr. Gachet. Later, Vincent would also describe in a letter that he painted Dr. Gachet with a melancholy expression, sad but gentle, yet clear and intelligent. He also wrote that this is how portraits ought to be done, so that it may be looked at for a very long time, and that perhaps these portraits may even be looked back on with longing 100 years later. During Vincent's last 70 days in Auvers-sur-Oise, he completed the painting almost every day. But a tragic incident happened soon after. Allegedly, on the 27th of July, Vincent walked into a wheatfield and got shot in the stomach by a pistol. He is badly wounded, but he was still breathing. Incredibly, he then got back on his feet and slowly walked back to his room in Auvers-sur-Oise. What really happened that day is still widely debated. Most people believe that Vincent shot himself, but some researchers suggest a different story. They believe that when Vincent was painting outdoors, there were some local boys who used to bully Vincent. A local teenager named René Secretan was playing with a pistol and may have accidentally shot Vincent as a result of a prank. These teenagers may have kept quiet out of fear, while Vincent may have chosen to protect them. However, scholars from the Van Gogh Museum remain unconvinced, claiming that the theory is entirely unfounded. But no matter what truly happened, Vincent managed to return to his room after sunset. Arthur Raveau, the owner of the inn, saw Vincent's injury and immediately went out looking for medical help. A doctor who lived nearby, named Joseph Mesri, quickly rushed to Vincent, followed by Dr. Paul Gachet. The nearest hospital was miles away, and transporting Vincent by horse and cart along a rocky road would be extremely painful and risky. So both doctors did everything that they could, but they knew that Vincent would not survive for long. In the morning, Theo, who's in Paris, received a note delivered by a lodger from Auvers-sur-Oise. Theo quickly rushed to Vincent, and when Theo arrived, Vincent was still alive and able to talk. Arthur Raveau explained the medical situation, and then Theo spent the rest of the day next to Vincent. They talked for many hours, and Vincent even asked about his nephew. But on the 29th of July, after 30 hours of suffering, Vincent fell into a coma and passed away in his brother's arms. The funeral for Vincent was held in the morning. Despite the short notice, many friends and artists around the area heard the news and came, including Émile Bernard from Paris. Émile later wrote to the art critic Albert Aurier, describing Vincent's funeral. He wrote that the room around Vincent's coffin was filled with many of his art. It was surrounded with yellow flowers everywhere, including sunflowers that he loved. Theo cried so much that he could barely speak, while Dr. Gachet spoke beautifully, describing Vincent as an honest man and a great artist, with only two goals in life: humanity and art. After Vincent's funeral, Theo, on the way back to Paris, wanted to plan a memorial exhibition for Vincent. Reportedly, Theo also said to a friend that he shouldn't be surprised if Vincent turned out to be a genius and would one day be compared to someone like Beethoven. Theo was right. But tragically, Theo didn't live long enough to find out. With the help of Émile Bernard, Theo and Joanna organized a private memorial exhibition for Vincent. But just within a few days of the exhibition, Theo started to suffer from hallucinations, and his health quickly turned to the worst. A few months later, Theo broke down completely and had to be sent to medical asylum in the Netherlands. His medical records are now available to the public, showing that Theo had dementia paralytica, a terrible mental disorder caused by syphilis. Without any chance of recovery, Theo was then taken to Den Dolder, where he passed away on the 25th of January, 1891. After Theo passed away, many friends came together to promote the works of Vincent van Gogh. Émile Bernard was one of the greatest supporters. In 1891, he wrote an article on Vincent for a magazine. And the following year in Paris, he organized a solo exhibition for Vincent, a small show of 16 artworks. Many years later, he also collected the letters of Vincent that were sent to him and his friends and published them as a book in 1911. However, by far, the most successful and dedicated promoter of Vincent turned out to be Theo's widow, Joanna. In a diary, she once described marrying Theo as the happiest time of her life. But everything changed after Vincent and Theo passed away. Theo had left her two legacies, their child Vincent and the lifelong task of promoting the work of Vincent as much as possible. After Theo's passing, Joanna inherited around 400 paintings and many hundreds of drawings, nearly half of all the art done by Vincent van Gogh. Starting in the 1890s, Joanna sold a few pieces of these paintings to support herself and her son. But she quickly understood how important it was to arrange exhibitions and to showcase every piece of art. The first exhibition that she organized for Vincent was in 1892, featuring over 100 pieces of work. But by far the most important exhibition was at the Stedelijk Museum in 1905. This exhibition displayed around 480 artworks. It was the largest Van Gogh exhibition and played a big part in Vincent's rise to fame. In a cabinet left by Theo, Joanna also found all the letters that Theo had kept of Vincent. She thought about publishing these letters, but felt that it wouldn't be right to spark interest in their private life before Vincent's paintings received the recognition they deserve. So she waited patiently until 1914 and finally published the letters in a 3-volume book. In the same year, Joanna also decided to move Theo's remains from the Netherlands to Auvers-sur-Oise so that Theo could be buried next to his brother Vincent. By 1921, Vincent had become a famous artist. A respected German historian and art critic, Julius Mayer-Grafer, published a detailed biography on Vincent van Gogh. Julius presented a melodramatic view of Vincent's life, emphasizing his identity as the unrecognized genius. This biography not only shaped the narrative and mystery surrounding Vincent, it also set the foundation for many other books and legends about the artist for centuries to come.